let's see here. Pause that. Everything seems to be up and running. Let me go to my stream here. See if there's anything I need to hit up. Okay, so mapping, we're going to go ahead and map to just a portion of my monitor. I think that looks fine. And we're good to go. So one thing I did that we were working on a long time ago, it's been a while since I've been here, is under streaming, we had all of this stuff here. Let me go to details. Let me grab this one here. So if I wanted to render this in a certain way, and these are all fairly basic shapes, so I'm thinking what we can do is go ahead and use UV master for these. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and do a group by normals on all of these. These ones I probably won't have to because their normal angle threshold's not going to pick up anything, so I think these will be fine. Or I might, you know what, do a poly group along the sides here. And these ones should have a front and a back, so let me see if I can do a group by normals here. And then we'll just do a quick mirror and weld. Yeah, that'll work. And then, like I said before, for these things, if I'm going to be UVing them, preferences, edit, turn off align cursor to surface. Hey everybody, thanks for showing up. I'm going to be doing a little bit of just really quick surface noise work, I think. Just kind of wrapping up the final thought on these guys here. And what I'm going to be doing is UVing these things. So when I go into UV master, what I like to do is have poly groups assigned so that they unwrap a little bit more how I would expect them. I can control that a little bit better just with poly groups here. And just like this one here, if I just UV unwrap this, I want to be in control over how it UV unwraps. What I'm going to do is hold down Control Shift, and I'm going to grab, say, this ring here and this ring here, and then I'm just going to do a auto groups, and then we'll do, and that'll give you poly groups on either side. And then if I Control Shift click on both of these poly groups and hit Control W, that'll just go ahead and assign that as one solid poly group here, and we can just continue to do that. So in here, we'll just grab this one. We'll go a little further back. And I'm just trying to hide the seams here. So if I go into auto groups and then grab these two, there we go. And then one more. Grab this back here. And then auto groups and then these two. And if you didn't know, with Control Shift held down, you have Select Lasso. That'll go ahead and select edge rings. That's kind of a feature of the Select Lasso. If you don't like that, switch over to hold down Control Shift and grab Select Rectangle. But anyways, now I've got poly groups here. Let's go ahead and get these eyeballs. And let's go back one more. There we go. And then I'm going to do a quick mirror and weld, get both of those on the same side, and that's under Geometry, Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld. And then on the back here, when this cylinder unwraps, I want it to unwrap in the back, so I can probably paint that to do that. So let's go ahead and merge all of these together. So I'm going to go into the Merge menu and Merge Visible. And now we've got this thing merged, and we've got our poly groups on here, and I think we're ready to go ahead and UV this thing. So let's open up C plugin, UV Master. We got symmetry on, we got poly groups on. We'll just see how it does. So I'm going to go ahead and hit work on clone, and then we're going to flatten. I'm sorry, not flatten, unwrap. And now if I hit flatten, we can see how it UV'd it. Everything looks fine. When I go to put on the UVs, we'll see if this is going to work for us, but it should be okay. And if we go unflatten here and we check our seams, now we can see where the seams are, and luckily it did put the seams right along the back here. For these two right here, it did go ahead and split them here and here. That shouldn't be too big of a deal. I think I can live with that. We'll see how it turns out. If I needed to though, I could go ahead and do turn off check seams and then enable control painting, and we'll go ahead and protect. And if I want to protect any areas here, I can just go ahead and hold down mask lasso. and we can invert that. And in fact, in R8, if you hold down Control and then hold down Alt and nothing's masked, that'll go ahead and just unmask this area here. And now with Protect here, we can go ahead and fill that with whatever the color it chooses for Protect. If you do Attract, it'll be blue, and if you do Erase, it'll just be white. So we'll go ahead and protect this front area here, and that'll tell ZBrush, hey, leave these alone, although on the eyeballs it's probably not going to do a very something that I'm looking for here. So let's go ahead and grab these three here, and now we'll just fill those with Attract. And now when we do Unwrap, and then we do Flatten, cool, and then we do Check Our Seams. It still really wants to cut that one right there, as opposed to this one. So let's try this. Let's grab this one here, and we're going to say Attract, and let's say Flatten. Yeah, it really just wants to cut it there. Oh, well, I can live with that. So we've got this off, and we've got our UVs here. So let's go ahead and copy these UVs over to our other one here, and we'll go ahead and paste these UVs. And now this object has UVs on it. We can go ahead and hit D, which is our dynamic subdivisions. Underneath geometry here, you're going to have, what are we looking for here? Dynamic subdivisions turned on. And we also have creasing here. So if we did have creases on here, which I don't know that we do, but if we did, let's say we want to just go into our crease menu here, and we'll just run a crease tolerance. Oh boy. Let's do uncrease all. Yeah, there's some pretty heavy, weird creasing on here. That one probably doesn't need to be creased, but if I wanted to manually go down here and crease this one, I can like hover over this edge, and we just do like crease edge loop complete, and then we can crease this top edge here. So now when we hit D for dynamic, it'll be nice and preview dynamically subdivide over here. So we turn that up to 3, it'll be nice and smooth. However, this is razor sharp, so that's when this crease level comes in. So if I do a smooth subdiv of 3 and then a crease level of 2, I can kind of have that fall off just a little bit more, or a smooth subdiv of 4, crease level of 3 here. And, or you know what, crease level of 2. Let's back that off just a little bit more. There we go. Let's give it a nice soft look here. Yes, this is a flower here, and this is kind of goes off of what we were working on before. So, and this was weeks ago, obviously. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm just wrapping up a thought here. So we did our bullet box, and we did our ghost. And we did our question box, and we did our star thing. So if I go out here and I go through, so here's our little question box, and here's our ghost that we did. Here's our bullet box that we did, and this one we're gonna have to turn on live Boolean render here. So because we used our Boolean meshes, if you look in here, you're gonna see start groups and stuff that have this all laid out for us. And then of course our flower thing here. Now the whole reason I went through the UV process here, and I'm going to check, that's the merge, this is merged. I'm going to check and make sure this one does have UV. So if we go down here to our UV map and our texture map, it says delete UV, so it has UVs on it. We can go through here, and on texture map we can create new from UV check, and then we can see our UVs on there. Cool. We can turn our textures off. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into surface noise, or surface, sorry, and we can turn on noise. And by default, boy, this thing is really laggy in this viewport all of a sudden. Wonder why that is. You know what, it might be because I have a lot of dynamic subdivisions on here. Let's go back to geometry here, and let's take the smooth subdivisions down to like 2 and see if that helps any. Okay, a little bit faster. Okay, so by default, when you do surface noise, it's going to be kind of rocky. And so if we go over here and like crank down that strength a little bit and crank up that noise scale, you're going to see it's going to look like it's made out of concrete, which if that's what you're going for is perfectly fine. And of course you can go in here and modify this noise to be what you want. And by default, it's going to be set to planar projection. Default noise works fine, works really well over your entire object, but if you wanted to say go into noise plug, and we want to do like a weave pattern on this, and let's go ahead and crank up that scale, and we'll go into the plugin scale, and then we'll go into strength here. You're going to see, let me see if we can see how we kind of have rock and another noise in here. That's because we have this mixed basic noise, so go ahead and turn that down to 0, and then we'll take this plugin scale and drop it down, and then strength. So now we have a weave pattern. However, you're going to see that weave pattern is being projected. It's doing a planar projection here, so it's getting skewed on the sides because it's basically just looking straight at the object, or however you brought the object in, it looks straight at it and projects that weave pattern onto it. So we'll switch over to UV, and now this will use my UVs that we have on our object, and now we can tile this nice fabric look, and we'll do strength here. There we go. So now we have like a weave on our object. And of course, if you turn off relative, that'll give you a little bit more wiggle room to play with the strength of this fabric here. So we hit OK. Now you can go in here, and now it looks like a little fabric flower. If you have your own alpha, which we do, you can go into edit this noise. And instead of doing a noise plug, we go ahead and turn that off. We'll keep UV turned on. I'm going to go to alpha, and we're going to go to desktop. And I have a height in here. I got out a painter, and this is going to be a knit pattern. And we'll go ahead and see if this will work for me. Alpha scale, and again we have mixed basic noise turned down. Seems to be doing some weird stuff with my leaves down there. So what we can do is, let's see, alpha scale here, scale it down. I want it to be about yay big. Strength, mixed basic noise strength is pretty high. Seems to be pretty lackluster on here, but what I can do is I can go to, when I start subdividing this thing up, which is going to be under our geometry dynamic, I have my dynamic on. I'm going to change this back up to 4, and then Shift D, and now we have a nice smooth look. I'm going to go ahead and apply those subdivisions here, and this noise here is just a displacement map right now. But before I do this, I'm going to make a new layer here, and I want to make sure I have enough subdivisions here. Yeah, it should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say make a new layer, and just in case, I'm also going to go down here and store a morph target. And there's a couple different ways I can apply this noise. I can just apply it to my mesh, and that'll go ahead and just apply that noise to my mesh, and then I can go in here to my layer, and I can over crank it, or I can under crank it if I want to. Another thing I can do is, let's just undo that. I can go over here to the noise menu, and I can say mask by noise, and that'll give me a mask where the noise is. And now I can just go in here to my deformation menu, and we can go through here and we can do, let me see, inflate way down here maybe, or you can do inflate balloon, and you can actually just manually inflate where you want that noise to go. And if you want to see what this looks like without the mask, go down here to masking, turn off view mask. It'll keep your mask on there, but it'll go ahead and inflate and deflate through that mask. So if you have that noise applied, we can go ahead and say, okay, so we have it on this layer. If we turn off this record here, we can go through here and we can say, okay, I've inflated a little too much, so I can dial this down a little bit on this layer and just dial that in. Or if I feel I didn't crank it up enough, I can go through here and I can over crank it. So that's kind of why I put this on a layer first, so I can have a little bit more room to kind of dial this in, and then we can go, okay, bake all. And the reason why I put a morph target on here is with this morph target saved, what I can now do is I can go to BM and then go to, where am I at? Morph, and I can turn on X, go across X symmetry if I want to. I can turn off RGB. Crank that the intensity up to 100 if you want, and now you can morph out any areas you don't like if you wanted to. Like if you didn't want the eyeballs, you could just morph those out, or you can go over here to switch, and that'll switch your morph target to be what you're going to morph to, and now you can just kind of dial in or paint in where you want that kind of knit look to show up. But this is fine, I suppose. So I'm going to go ahead and save this one as... Oh, what do I want to save this one as? We'll go to streaming, flower, and we'll call this flower knitted. All right. So that's all I really wanted to do to kind of wrap that up. If you wanted to, you can also go in here to, let's see, no, we can just render it in here. So I'm also going to use Quadro because that's where I keep all my reference here. So let's go to here. Give me a second. And that's Quadro. It's a reference viewer, so now I can just go to Open Recent, grab all my Yoshi reference. It'll populate it all over my screen. And then I can just look at the color combinations here. So if I want to, I can just do a really quick poly paint where, you know what, and I can actually sample from those colors if I want to, but I think I'm just going to eyeball it. So let's go over here. So we've got our color menu over here, and we're going to go to... we'll start with white, and we'll do a slightly off white with maybe a little bit of cyan mixed in. So it's not just a pure white here. I'm going to Control Shift tap on this one, and it's only going to grab that front poly group, so do Control Shift A, which is visibility, grow all, and then I'm going to hit my hotkey for fill color here, and that's going to be Alt Control F is my fill object here. And then so we've got this one. I'm also going to go to skin shader under my material so I can see this a little bit better. Let's go to a darker kind of a slate, and we'll grab these eyeballs, Control Shift A, fill, and we'll go to a yellow, pretty saturated yellow, and then we'll go to kind of a, looks like an orangey red. It's not a super red. And then finally, just kind of a greenish yellow. There we go. So we've got this thing color filled. And if you wanted to, you could even go in here. You could paint in, if you could mask by, let's try that. If we wanted to kind of punch this up a little bit, what you can do is let's temporarily turn off our colorize here. Just turn off that little paintbrush here, and we're going to go to masking, and we can do mask by peaks and valleys maybe. Let's try that. So mask by peaks and valleys. There's also mask by cavity we can try. There we go. Do mask by cavity, and now it'll go ahead and mask all of these interior spaces on here. And again, if you turn off view mask, it'll still be masked and you can view it. And then we can go back up here, turn on our poly paint, and now that we have that masked, you can go in here, and if you wanted to say maybe go in here with it, and you can hit C to sample these colors if you want to now that you have them on there. So if you want to go in here with maybe a darker red and start painting, that'll paint over those, or you can Control tap to invert your mask, and we'll go ahead and turn off view mask again, and now you can go through here and you can paint a darker red. And if you want to just isolate it just to this one area, just do visibility, Control Shift A, and now you can go through here and just kind of, you know, put in a little bit where make it darker where it's kind of recessed, if that's the look you're kind of going for. And again, depending on the rendering you're doing, if you're going to render this in ZBrush, this might be a good alternative. If you're going to render in Keyshot, you may not have to do that, but it'll kind of make those little nitty things pop more. So we'll go ahead and grab this one, Control Shift A. We'll hit C to sample that color. Looks like we didn't fill that whole one. Let's go ahead and unmask, fill that, and then we'll go back here and mask by cavity again, invert, turn off view, and then we'll just grab a slightly darker. And you could go ahead and fill, do a color fill with this mask as well. I'm just going to kind of dial it in manually, just kind of go through here and just lightly paint a little bit here. And finally, we'll grab this one. That's all filled. We'll sample it, and we'll go back to just a little darker. Like I said, we'll just make these pop just a tiny bit more. And for these ones, we can grab both of these, Control-Shift to select with our select rectangle, and then Control-Shift-A, and you can invert that by Control-Shift dragging over here, and then we can C to sample, and then darken it up, and then you can just keep painting this here. Alrighty, so we've got a knitted looking thing. It pops a little bit better, and now we can render this thing out in ZBrush. Whew. How's everybody doing? Masking, so Pro says masking seems to work slightly different in this version than before. I'm not sure. I haven't really noticed anything too different, unless it's something specific I haven't tried yet. Wild Kitty 55 says, "Hi Michael, it's my first time live with you. How good is UVs in ZBrush?" They're okay. If you need something kind of quick, just like we did in here, and you don't want to go to an external program and do a ton of UV work or very precise UV work, ZBrush is fine. Usually, and since I'm only doing previs in ZBrush, usually it's not really super production work on like game res or anything. ZBrush is perfect for that. I can just get something in quickly, get it done, UV'd, get the idea I want, and then make sure that, you know, working fast and iterating, I can get this looking nice. And then when I'm ready to do my final game res, probably I'm not going to do my UVs in ZBrush, but for my high-res work, it's perfectly fine. Hey, thanks for showing up, Craig. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Glad everybody's showing up. Sorry I haven't been on this channel in a while. My schedule has been kind of busted. You fixed your render problem with Keisha that I asked you about on Twitter? Oh, okay. Cool. Can we render this in Keyshot too? Yeah, let's do that as well. So we'll do a ZBrush render, and then we'll do a Keyshot render, and we'll talk about the differences between them. So let's say, okay, we got our guy here, and what we're gonna do is there anything else we want to paint on him? Because we're making a knit version on this guy, so you know he's kind of plasticky over here. So we could do two renders here, one where we do a knit render and one where we do a plasticky render, because this will actually pop really well in Keyshot. It will in ZBrush as well, but Keyshot is really kind of built for that kind of thing here. So let's say let's talk rendering in ZBrush just a tiny bit. So we're going to go over here to our render tab, and we'll say so when we hit BPR, what that's going to do is do a best preview render. And then I'll go ahead and give us shadows because that's what we have turned on. So if you go over here to our render properties here, you're going to see we have shadows turned on. If we wanted to do AO, which I think we do, and ambient occlusion is basically wherever, if you look up in the corner of the room you're in, I'm assuming you're sitting in a room somewhere and you look into the corners, you're going to see it looks darker where two walls meet. If you just render shadows and you don't render ambient occlusion for your scene, it's going to have a very CG look. Ambient occlusion will go ahead and render out darker areas where light can't quite get into the recessed areas. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And as soon as you turn any of these on, what you need to do is open up like BPR shadow and BPR AO, and these are the settings you can play with. So right now you can see our shadow isn't very blurry. If you wanted to blur your shadow out, you could say blur this out, or you can drop the resolution down. Probably if you drop the resolution down, it'll render faster. If you turn the blur up, it might render a little bit slower. Same thing with BPR AO. So if we render this now, and you know what, we don't need to have live boolean on. I forgot I turned that on. There we go. So now you can see in these areas here, it's kind of collecting that ambient occlusion map in here. Our shadows are still pretty crispy. So let's say if we crank that blur up to maybe 5. Let's overcrank it. Fine. Blur 38. Okay, it's a little bit too blurry. And the cool thing about this is if you don't do anything, that's a little bit better. If you're not doing anything, if you're just changing colors or something, you can just hit BPR, and as long as you don't move your camera or change your lighting, the BPR will just be instantaneous. So it'll just re-render your BPR, or not, it won't even re-render it, it'll just reintroduce your BPR that you had saved previously. So let's talk a little bit more about what other options we got in here. I don't do a ton of rendering in here. If you turn on subsurface scattering in here, or wax preview is probably a little bit easier. So we can go in here to wax preview, and it's not going to make a whole lot of sense on a knit object, but just since while we're in here, we can also go into our material properties here. So if we go into material properties and we go to wax modifiers and we crank up that strength, you can see we can dial in a little bit of preview SSS, and then you can render that. Of course, you're going to want to turn on wax. If you don't have wax preview turned on and you go into your material and crank your strength up, it's going to say, hey, you need to go into wax preview right here in your render properties. Say, okay, so turn that on. And now in your material settings, let's drag this over here. You can go to wax modifiers, strength, and then you can crank up kind of that SSS look. But we don't really need SSS for this one, or a waxy look for this one. Speaking of materials here, we can still swap this material out with whatever we want. We haven't filled it with a material yet. So right now we have Skin Shader 4, which is fine. If we go here to basic material, this is just going to be kind of a default material, so we can go ahead and render this out. And you can go over here to the material tab and say, okay, we're working with our default material. The diffuse is at 80. I'm going to crank that up to 100 so we can see the full diffuse. Ambient, this is if we go to our lighting menu. And when we're talking about rendering, it's always lighting, color, or textures, and material settings that all work together to make that work. So you really can't talk about rendering without talking about at least three things. But if we go to our lighting here and we take that light intensity down to 0, you're still going to see it shows up just a tiny bit. That's that ambient kicking in. If you crank up that ambient, there you go. Now it kind of looks like a flat color here. So you turn that ambient down to 0, now you're going to get a completely black. We'll go ahead and crank this light up to 1. Okay, so we've got that. We can play around with a specular. If no specular is going to be, it's completely flat. If we crank it up, it's going to be very shiny. And you can also go down here to your Fong and Blinn, and you can change that specular roll, fall off. And then also in here, you can change the specular curve. So right now, it's kind of broad. You can go in here and you can tighten this up, and this will make it like a kind of wet looking, if that's what you're going for. We can kind of keep this pretty broad and pretty not specular for a knit kind of look here. And you can also go down here to metallicity, and if you wanted the color on your specular to inherit, so you can see this specular is reddish and this specular is yellow and this specular is white, that's going to give it kind of a metal look. So you can kind of play around with that. And what else can you go? You can go in here with a texture, and we can grab like this texture here, and you can go into reflectivity if you want to, and you can crank that reflectivity up, and that'll reflect that. So all sorts of crazy cool stuff you can do in ZBrush. So we'll go ahead and we'll drop the specular down to something reasonable, and then we'll hit BPR again, and there we go. Now we've got shadows, AO, and we've dialed in the settings we want. I'm going to tighten up that AO just a little bit. We'll go back down to our render properties here. And under BPR AO, let's say we want to blur that less, maybe blur of 3, and that resolution will crank up. And that'll just kind of tighten that AO up just a little bit more. And you're also going to see that angle is set to 360. Our angle on our shadow is 0, but the more you crank that angle up on the shadow, the more it'll become an AO look. And as soon as you hit 360, it's just going to be a very ambient shadow. So, cool, awesome. Takovach says, sorry, I have a question. What's the real difference between making 3D assets for game versus movies? The real difference between making 3D assets for games and movies. Well, games, you have to be, and again, I'm speaking in very, very general terms here. There's a lot of overlap, but from a very high level, I would say you probably don't have to worry about resources as much when you're working on movies if you're going pre-rendered. You can do real-time rendering in movies as well, but if you're going for a real-time solution in a game that has to run at 60 frames a second, you have to be very, very careful about how you allocate your resources. Whereas if you're pre-rendering, you're just sending it to a render farm. Your UVs don't have to be optimized. You can have as many draw calls as you want within reason. I mean, you're still going to want to optimize your scenes in movies. You don't want to increase render times by hours just because you're being sloppy. But it's not as it's not quite as a deal breaker in movies if you were to send an asset that wasn't really super tightly optimized to render, because it's just a pre-rendered image, so it doesn't run at a real, it doesn't run real time. And also, when you're making games, you're not really optimizing generally for the best in the market, so you're not rendering for the top of the line. Computers, that could change if when we transition to a server-side rendering model, which is probably going to happen, where the companies are going to be controlling the game. So the game is going to be on their servers, it's going to be running on their hardware. So the good news is there's not going to be another minimum spec. You can play Crysis on your phone, because it's not really going to be rendering anything. It's going to be streaming video, and you're going to be playing the game basically on their servers with their hardware. So really their min spec is going to be whatever their servers are, whatever their hardware is on the server side. But for now, what we have to do is, when we make games, we have to, you have here's your minimum spec for playing a video game. You go on Steam and you can see that, and then here's your minimum spec, and then here's what we would prefer you to have for the optimum gaming experience, the hardware you would need. And of course, the better hardware you have, the faster it can run and the better it will render your objects in real time. Having said that, because we have to, give assets to a minimum spec, we have to optimize very much for not optimal hardware, so it can kind of dumb down everything that we make. So you have to just be more careful on the game side as far as like what your game res, what your poly count is, how many materials are on it, how you atlas those materials, how you stream them in. So it's kind of like a really intricate puzzle, especially on the environment side, but also on the character side and weapons and stuff. There's a lot, and whenever you get into animation and bones, and fitting all this into memory and getting it to load within a reasonable amount of time and getting it to render real time, it's a lot of hoops you need to jump through, which doesn't necessarily happen in movies as much. You still need to optimize, just not quite as crazy. So that's the quick and dirty version of what might be the difference. On the high-res side, probably not a whole lot. I make billion polygon meshes for my high reses in video games, and I would probably do the same thing if I was working in movies. I don't know that for a fact. I've never worked in movies. But just the behind the scenes that I watch and the people I talk to that I know that work in movies, it seems very similar to what we do on the high res source, is very similar to what they do in movies. Okay, so we got this light here and we're rendering. And so when you do a BPR render, and we've already messed with our materials here, we go to render, render properties, BPR shadow. When you go in here to render pass, you're going to see we have a shaded mode, we have a depth here that we can take into Photoshop, we have a shadow, we have an AO pass, we have a mask pass. We didn't do subsurface scattering or a floor. For floor, if we turn on our floor, oh boy, I need to rotate this guy around. So let's go ahead and do that. So I want him to be Z forward. I don't know why I always forget to do this. Let's unmask, and then we'll rotate him 90 degrees. There we go. So now we've got a floor on his bottom there. And now when we hit BPR render, there we go. Now he's rendering and he has a little floor plane here. And if you go over here, there's going to be a floor. And it's not really doing a shadow catch here. Depth map from the BPR render floor. Interesting. Anyway, I do like that shadow, so we'll go ahead and keep that. What else do we want to do? Oh, light. So we can change this light as well. Because we have a basic material on here, as we move this light, you're going to see it update in our viewport. So if you want to do like a high noon BPR render, you can do that. That'll have the light coming straight down. You can also mix and match lights when you have a basic shader, or when I say basic shader, I just mean the standard materials down here. The matte cap materials don't quite work like that. So if I go over here and I select my matte cap gray, and you do a BPR render, you're going to see it'll do the lighting direction for one light. So I still have my shadows being cast, but as I move this light around, since in a matte cap, the lighting is baked in, it's not going to really move the light around. Okay, let's talk about this real quick here. Streaming. Keep going to bring this up. Okay, so if you want to watch previous videos of this particular channel, I'm going to link you to that. That is the Pixelogic YouTube here. You can just go to Pixelogic's channel, and I think I've got a playlist on there. So you can see this is where we made our little ghost guy and our little bullet box. If you go all the way down through here, you can see all the stuff we've worked on in the past on this particular channel. And then if you go to my YouTube channel here, that's my YouTube channel. I've got a bunch more stuff on here. And the reason I bring this up is because if you go to the playlist section, you're going to see a ZBrush Guides stylized rendering. So I went through www.zbrushguides.com and we did a video, companion video through all this matcap stuff. So there's a lot of cool matcap work you can do. I can go ahead and link you guys to just the playlist here, and you can check that out if you'd like. And also go to www. I guess I don't need to say that anymore, right? I'm not from the 90s. So ZBrushGuides.com, https:// go to that website there, and you can check that out. So one of the cool things about matcap is I can go to, you can do an outline shader and kind of make it look like Toon Shader, or if I hit the comma key here and you go check out that, we can do like a comic style rendering. So we can go ahead and do like an ink render here and go to this material and we can turn on S3. So now we're getting kind of like an ink drawing. In fact, if you turn out the colorize and go to white, you can see that's really the look you're getting. If you can even do a BPR render on top of this, then you can get a very stylized ink drawn look. Or if you want it to look like, I don't know, let's see, what is this? Classic Batman. Here is a classic Batman render. So you can see it kind of has that look there. It's kind of neat. And then you can render this out. And you can kind of get that look. So there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with matcaps that are very, very stylized. I just like playing around with these. That's a cool one. And again, we have our poly paint turned off. If you turn that on, it'll mix the matcap. Now this matcap's pretty powerful. It's red. So in that case, these are kind of overpower. Ooh, that's a cool looking one. That's like Sin City style. That'll overpower your poly paint. Neat. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to our base material and we'll turn our poly paint back on. And we're rendering here. So another thing you can do when you hit BPR, let it render. Oh, if your floor doesn't have enough room, it's catching our shadow just fine. However, if it isn't, like say your grid size was really tiny, and then you do a BPR render, it's going to kind of clip on the sides. Just go to your draw menu here, and just like I did before, take your grid size and just scale that up, and that'll catch your shadows a little bit better. Ta-da! Babu says, always when Pav is on, I feel like I have so many questions, but I can never remember any. Well, if you think of them, let me know. This, when I talk on Pixelogic channel, that's not as active as my personal channel. So on my personal channel, I stream Thursday mornings, and then here I stream Tuesday morning, same time. Different channel. So you can go to Pavmike, Twitch, Pavmike. I don't know, you guys can find it. And I also stream to YouTube at the same time I do restream. I need to see if I can restream the, well, I can restream to Facebook. I don't know if I'll bother. But anyways, when you watch those ones, those, I get tons and tons of just chatter on that channel. On this one, it's a lot, it's a little more calm. There's not as many people here on here, so I'm usually pretty good about catching questions in this stream. On mine, not so much. Do you have the matcaps available anywhere? Those ones I don't, but if you go to ZBrushGuides.com, wait for it. There we go. Go to tutorials, ebooks, wait for it. And then a guide to ZBrush Comic Style Render. Just get this one, it's free. And then there will be all the matcaps and all the resources. You can just download it with this and this cool little walkthrough guide. And basically all I did was go through this walkthrough guide in video form on my channel. That's all I did. So we got that. And so the other cool thing about having a basic material and not a matcap is, again, we can change the lighting here. So we can do like a light this way. And if we want to, we can turn on another light by tapping it. Oh, I forgot to mention this light here. If you tap it once, it'll send it around to the back, and you can kind of do a rim light like this. And you can also crank up the intensity if you want to do a really sharp rim light if you wanted to. And we're also telling it under light properties to cast shadows. So you need to turn that on if you want it to cast shadows. We'll go ahead and pop this around to the side here. We'll say like 1.25. And then again, we'll move that up to the top, and then we'll turn on another light here. This light intensity is only at 3. So when we hit BPR render, you'll get a strong light from the top and then a very soft, subtle light from the bottom. You can take this light from the bottom here and you can crank it up. So now we're getting 2 lights. This second light here isn't casting a shadow. So you're getting a shadow cast from one side and then a bounce light from the other side that doesn't cast a shadow. You can also go in here and change the color of this light. So if you wanted to do, like, make this one a warm light here, and I'm exaggerating this, but you can do a warm light and a cool light, like so. And now you'll have a cool light coming down from that side. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do in here. I'm probably going to keep it simple, so we'll just drop that down, and this one I'm not going to make so warm. Maybe we can keep it a little bit warm, but not crazy warm. And then we'll have BPR, and then when that's done, we can go down here to our render properties. And then down here under BPR render pass, again, we have all of these things we can save out, and we can throw these into Photoshop. Another thing you can do is under Z plugin, you can go to ZBrush to Photoshop. If you click on this little top part here, this will walk you through how this works. I've only used this a handful of times, so I am by no means an expert. We can give it a shot if you guys like. If you have any problems with it recognizing JSX files in Photoshop, you're going to have to set that up. But basically, you can store 5 custom material passes. And these materials here, you can clear your layer cache. Okay, so this is the troubleshooting. And then there we go. So I don't know, we can check that out if you want. So ProAs, with not having keyshot bridge tips on how to properly render in ZBrush is pretty interesting. ZBrush Photoshop is pretty good. Yeah, let's give it a shot. So I usually end up just saving these things out. Oh, if you also wanted to do a flat color, you can just do a flat color BPR and then save that out as well. So when you go to your BPR, your render pass here, your shaded mode will just be pure color, which is oftentimes very good to have. But first, we want to set up our document size. So we're working, if you wanted to, you can go to your document. And right now it's set to 1230 by 866. If you wanted to render to a particular size, like, let's say 1024 by 1024, you're going to need to turn off proportion because you want to keep your proportions if you have that on. There we go. We'll hit resize. Boom. And then hit Control N to clear your canvas, and then just drag your flower back out. Now, my document's kind of difficult to see. I'm going to turn this range. Let's see if we can change this document background here. There we go. So now we can see our background a little bit better. You can see it we can't really see the borders of it, so it's going to be hard to position our mesh very well on here. So what we're going to do is go to, oh boy, is that under our draw menu? It used to be over here on the side. They moved it over here to the draw menu. I think, or is it under the transform menu? Yeah, transform. So now we can move, zoom, move, scale, and rotate. Nope, that's move, scale, and rotate. We keep that on draw, zoom. Boy, what am I looking for here? I want to zoom my document out. Okay, so those are going to be under document. That makes sense. Okay, I'm dumb. So under the document menu, now you have, you can move your document around, you can zoom your document out. So this is just so I can see the edges of my document. It's like, okay, now I see the whole 1024. So go to your document menu. And we don't need our background, that back color anymore. So we can just go ahead and pick just that gray. So now we have this, we can hit BPR, and we've got this nice and framed up. If you want to save this camera view, you can go over here to your document menu. You can go down to ZapLink properties, and you can store a custom camera view, so you can move this thing around, and then you can hit custom, and it'll snap right back to it. You can also go to your movie menu, go to timeline, show, and then you can just click on here, and then you can move your stuff around. And then if you just move this thing back, it'll go ahead and snap to that. You can say multiple camera views in here. And then if you hit your arrow keys, you can just flip between them like so. It's kind of up to you. If you don't like these, just drag them off. And if you don't want to use movies, you can just go ahead and do don't show, and then we can hit this custom one. So there we go. Camera view saved, rendering saved. And now we can go to our, let me just close all these menus down. We'll start fresh. 1, 2. Okay, so Z plugin, ZBrush Photoshop. So I'm going to try this. Let's say flat color I want is material 1. Replace the matte cap white material assigned to material 1 with flat color. Yes, please. And then we're going to go to basic material here. And do I need to hit BPR first? It'll probably hit BPR for me. And then for material 2, we'll go ahead and save that one. And then we got BPR depth mask, polygroup ID we can turn on for masking purposes. And subtool ID, sure, we'll get that as well. So, well, this is only one subtool, so we don't really need that. If you had multiple subtools, every single subtool would have its own masking ID that you could use. We can go ahead and do a spec. We can do a lighting pass, I suppose. Okay, so hit BPR. Everything looks fine. Let's go ahead and ZBrush to Photoshop. Send it on over. It looks like I had some default materials set in there, which is fine. And after we're done with this, we'll go ahead and throw it into Keyshot. Whoa. As you can probably tell, give me a second here. And it's probably going to take me a minute to navigate through these. I'm working on a much larger monitor than I have space for, so now you can probably see what's going on. Let me verify that. Yeah, oh, but my head is right on the layer stack. Let's move me over here temporarily. Okay, so we've got our thing here. Let's take a quick gander through these layers here. Adjustments, yeah, I guess I do want to keep that. Swatches and color, we don't really need to see. And you can probably tell I don't really get into Photoshop all that much. We'll go ahead. I just want to see more layers here. So if we hold Control click this one, you're going to see our entire object has its own channel here that can be masked out. So if we go here, this is a flat color. Let's hit Control D to get rid of that. And we'll double click this and we can dial in our own background color. You can bring in your own background image if you want. We'll go ahead and say a light gray is fine. And then underneath here, we have a lighting material light set up. So we have a front light here, a left light we can add in. And if you add this in, you can also go down here and drop that opacity down if you want to just dial it in just a little bit, it looks like. Or you can turn it off altogether. Right, back left, back right. So we have a bunch of lights in here. And then our depth mask here. And our polygroup IDs here. This is geometry. So for our depth mask, what I'm going to do, let's see what we got in our channels here. So if I control click, actually, let me see, let me think about this. Okay, I'm going to do Control A. Yeah, but it's doing something weird. What I need is just the depth mask, please. Okay, so I've got the depth mask here. Control A, Control copy. And we can go into our channels here and we can add a new channel here. And we can just paste our depth mask into this channel. So when oh man, it didn't really do a BPR. Oh, maybe it did. So we got a depth mask in here. So now when I go back through and we do like our base layer render here, what you can do is Control A, Control Shift C to copy merged. And then we'll paste this. And if we go in here to blur, filter, blur, and we do a lens blur, we can do our source. Whoops. Okay, you guys, this window's a little bit big. There we go. We can do a lens blur. Our source is going to be our alpha 1, and now it's going to be using our our depth map. Of course, this looks like it's offset just a little bit, so oh, what a pain in my butt. So this is what I would really use our depth mask for. There's probably a more elegant way, possibly, and you can go through here and you can click and you can blur from here to here. But I don't want to set registration for that, so I don't know. Mess with this stuff if you'd like. You got specular and all this material stuff in here. It didn't say about those other materials here. So, I don't know, polygroup ID, you can use this one, you can hit W, and you can use your magic wand tool, or you can go to select by color range, and you can select this one and change the fuzziness here, so you just select this color range here, and then you can just use this to kind of mask out areas, or as a masking thing. I don't know, I'm having a hard time navigating this, so I'm just going to close on out of that, and I'm just going to do a really quick manual pass here. And I'll layer in my own lighting here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the, not Z plugin, we're going to go to render. And this is going to be simplified. So we'll take our shaded and we'll just make a new menu in here called renders, and we'll save our BPR render in there. We'll save our depth render in there. We'll save our shadow pass. We'll save our AO pass. We'll save our mask. And I guess we'll save our floor. So now that we have that, I'm also going to switch this to a flat color, do another BPR render here, and for this one, let's go ahead and turn off AO and shadows. And then we'll go ahead and save. And you know what? If we turn off, yeah, we need that on. So this is going to be our flat color, so we'll just take this shaded here and we'll say this flat color. And then we can move this back down to basic material. Now, if we wanted to do different lighting passes, you can just do that manually. So if we wanted to put in a rim light here, we can go to our light menu. And we can move this light around and get a lighting pass. I'm going to tap this to go back to the side here. We'll crank that intensity up a bit. And we'll say we want to just do like a fill over here, or a rim light over here. You can crank the intensity up. You can also go through here and we can change this, either change these material properties or select another material entirely if you wanted to change those properties. If we go back to the material menu here and we go through here, we can change the specular curve. If we want to pick up more of those highlights on the side, we can change that up, and you can also tighten those up. Tighten that specular up just a little bit so you can dial in what this lighting pass is going to do. In fact, you can also turn off polypaint here. We're just going to get a pure lighting pass here. And just so that it doesn't interfere with our shadows, we're going to go back down to render and turn back on our shadows and AO. And then we'll do a BPR render of just this lighting pass. There we go. So now when I overlay this or screen this later, here we can say this is light 01. So now I can just manually go into Photoshop here, and we can go to streaming, Yoshi renders. Let's grab all these, and then we go to window, arrange, float, all in Windows. So we'll start with our render here. And actually, you know what? This render isn't going to be all that useful. I'm going to start with our flat color here. I'll shift drag this one in just in case we need it. And I'll take our lighting pass and drop it in here. And I'll take our shadow pass and drop it in here. Oops, let's go Control A, copy, and paste our shadow pass in there. And then our mask. And our mask I'm going to throw into our channels here. And our floor, yeah, I don't need that one. Let's leave that one alone. Our depth, again, I'm going to copy into our channels here. Oh, you know what? Let me see. There we go. Channels, paste. There we go. That's our depth. And then our BPR AO, we can drop right in here. If you want to, we can say, okay, this is our AO map. This is our shadow. This is our light. This is our base. And this is our flat. So now, I guess we can start with our shadow pass here. So we take our shadow pass here and we turn that on, and then we change this to say a multiply layer. Now we're going to get our shadows over here, and you can drop this opacity of our shadows down if you want. You can also go in here to an adjustment layer if you want to do like a hue saturation. If you do a hue saturation right now, what it's going to do is change the overall hue and saturation of your object. So hold down Alt and then link that to just the shadow. And then you can actually do a colorize, and then you can change the hue of your shadows to like maybe an orange or a blue or whatever color you want to. If you want to see this by itself, you can just change that to normal, and you can see what we're doing here with our hue saturation is as we're passing this through, this is our shadow pass. So if you want your shadows to be a little cooler, you can drop that in, and then you can make them more or less saturated. And we also have our opacity turned down on this, I forgot. That's what we're doing. So we're making it a little bit cooler on our shadows. So when we do go into multiply here, we can drop our opacity down, and now you're just getting kind of a cool shadow dialed in. And then we can go to our light. I'm just going to drop this base down below. If you want to see the difference between these, we can go ahead and group all this stuff together. So here's our base render, and then here's the render, our render shadows. So we were just able to dial in those shadows a little bit by itself here, so it's not quite so contrasty. Then we can take our light menu here, and we'll just change this to a screen. And now you can dial in this light. And again, if you wanted to change this, we can go down here to hue saturation, Alt link it, and now in here you can say you can colorize that light, and you can make it warmer if you want to. And then our AO pass here, we'll put this down underneath shadow here, and same thing with the AO. If you wanted to, you could do another hue sat, and we can say, okay, AO, you are going to be colorized and also a little cooler and also a little multiply. So now we've got all three of these things working together to give us the final look we're going for. And you can do multiple lighting passes. If you wanted to do another lighting pass, you just got to hop over into ZBrush and do that. Let's go ahead and throw down a underneath this flat here. Now, if we want to just see this, so like if this is actually outside of this group here. So we've got our group here, and if we put this one down here, we could say, okay, this is our background. It's like, well, I still can't see it. All I got to do is go to my channels, control click this alpha here, and then we can assign that as an opacity mask. So now we can see our background is basically cutting this flower out, and now you can change your background however you want. And that's the base here. So that you can do, all of this stuff you can do in ZBrush. And again, if you wanted to, you can do Control A, Control Shift Copy, Control Paste, and now you can go in here to your, let's hit F, and you know what, that's not going to work. Let's go here. Nope, that's not going to work either. Come on, Photoshop. Fine. Let's hit Control Plus. There we go. So now when we go in here and we have all this selected, we can go into our filter, blur, lens blur, and now this will match up. So we can go to alpha 2 as our lens blur, and we can say, okay, I want this over here to be very in focus, and then you can change this radius down. So everything's in focus, and then as you crank that up, it's going to be more and more obvious that you're focused over here and blurring it out based on the depth of that, your depth mask here. So you can go through here and you could do like a tilt shift kind of thing if you want to. So if that's interesting to you, feel free to do that. Let's drop that radius down. It's really, really chugging. You just do a very slight version of that. And of course, on top of this, you can do all sorts of Photoshop magic. So good enough. Now, if we want, let's go ahead and swing our light back around so we can see what we're doing. And we'll drop this back down to 1. And we'll turn our polypaint back on. So let's say we wanted to render this in Keyshot. So I'm going to go to Render, External Render, Keyshot, and we'll just send that on over. How long are you planning to spend on the stream? I am only on here until 8 o'clock. 6 to 8. There we go. So we got our object in here. In Keyshot, it looks like I need to, you know what we can possibly do? I don't know how fancy we want to get in here. So right now it's all just one object in here. If I want, I can break these apart in Keyshot. I can go in here and right click and say edit geometry and split this thing apart, but I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. It's probably easier just to go through here, and I'm going to take this object here and we're going to go to split to similar parts. Let's see how that does. And it's going to reconstruct our reconstruction history, which is fine. We'll take it. And then this flower here is going to, let's go ahead and separate these out as well. Control Shift A, and then we'll go ahead and split. Hidden, that's on your subtool split menu. Oh, it has geometry, so let's delete lower and then split hidden. There we go. So now you got all these different subtools here. So now when we send this over to Keyshot, it will send it over as multiple objects. And the cool thing about that is, in my scene mode, I can go select this one, I can right click this, and we can go to move part, and we can actually move this flower part down just a tiny bit, just to get rid of that gap that was at the bottom. Of course, I could also do that in ZBrush before I send it over, but just to show you, you could do that in there as well. We could probably send 2 versions of this over as well. We've got this version here, so what I'm going to do in Keyshot, I think this will work. If we go in here and rename this, where is that at? Can I rename this? I'm pretty sure I can. Actually, is this fitting okay on there? Let's move this over just a tiny bit. There we go. So we got our models here. Maybe we just double click it. Come on, let me rename this thing. Delete. Add to group. Oh, there we go. Name, ZBrush. We'll call this knit flower. Okay, and then we're going to go back to ZBrush here, and we're going to say, give me my version that was just smooth. And we'll hit D, and we'll go ahead and do crease level of 2, smooth subdiv of 4. And we can go ahead and do split to similar parts, or just split the parts. I'll split the similar parts so we can keep the eyeballs together. Then we'll take this one and we'll go ahead and split hidden. There we go. So we can send this one over as well, hopefully. Oh, you know what? I'm stupid. Let's go ahead and merge this one back down. Now when I merge this one, I'm going to say merge and weld. So it'll weld these back together. Control Shift A, split hidden, because I forgot for UV purposes I did that. And then we'll go ahead and do, ooh, I didn't weld the UVs back either. That's okay, we'll live. And then I can go ahead and send this over, because this one's just going to be plastic anyways. And we'll go to VPR. And we'll hop back over to Keyshot. So hopefully I'll be able to keep both of these versions here. Yeah, we can. So we've got our knit flower here. And then for this one, we've got our plastic flower. Man, I cannot type to save my life. Okay, so now we got both of these in here. Let's go to our plastics, and we'll go to our, we'll start with hard, shiny plastics, and we'll go ahead and drag on red onto this object, and then another red onto this one. Do not link those materials. I'm doing this on purpose, Keyshot. And then in here, I'll make this yellow. And then we'll do hard, shiny white, and then hard, shiny black. And if this white's too intense, and you know what? Let's go ahead and go to our environment real quick, and we'll do, this doesn't really matter. I'm going to do an outdoor. That'll work. And then for our environment over here, I'm going to switch that to a color, and we'll just drop that down just a bit. Okay, and I'm going to hold down Shift and what is it? Control, okay, control left click. I can go through here and I can rotate our environment around. Okay, so I can double click this material here and we can change that diffuse down just a tiny bit. That's a pretty intense white, so I'm just going to drop that down quite a bit. And then for the green, we'll go back to our materials here. Now let's drag that down here. And now these two I can link, so I'm just going to drag it from this side, and now those two are the same green. Then I can double click this one, and you can change this to whatever green color you want. So there's that flower here. Fun. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I've been streaming for an hour. I'm going to stream for probably another 55 minutes. Cool. Can you make grayscale into an RGB and then paste it? Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we've got this one in here, and this is kind of the plasticky one. So we can go to our scene here, and in this one you can render. There's a bunch of cool stuff. In fact, if we want to, we can take this one here and we can switch it from a plastic to like a translucent, and it'll take a little bit longer to render in, but that'll give you kind of a translucent quality to your stuff. There's so many cool things in here. We can go to, let's see, soft. Soft is what I'm looking for. No, what am I looking? Cloudy. We can go in here to cloudy, and we can do kind of a cloudy red, and then a cloudy yellow, and then a cloudy white, and then a cloudy black, and then a cloudy green. And that'll give us a very much different look. We'll kind of let that res in. Let's see how our processor's doing here. Whoa. There we go. That's really weird. Hold on, change graph to logical processors here. So when you're in KeyShot's a very CPU intensive processor here, so you're going to see it's completely maxed out. You can also go in here to your CPU usage, and you can say, I want to use all my cores. If you're doing other stuff besides KeyShot, of course you can just have that render in the background, but that'll work fine, I think. We can go back to our environment here, change it to our lighting environment. And we'll go back to ZBrush environments. There's also ZBrush textures in here you can do. And then again, control left click, you can spin these things around. And now you can have like a soft, clear plane. And now you're also going to want to go to your lighting menu. I forgot, we're in basic right now. So you can go up here to a product renderer. You can go to jewelry, and basically what you're doing is turning on global illumination. You're turning on caustics, which is fine. It's going to give you a more accurate render, but it's just going to take longer to render in. And whenever you're dealing with translucent materials or like soft materials that you can see through, it's going to really increase your render time. So something to keep in mind. But we can also go back here. Let's just go ahead and do edit. We'll send this back to where we had. Yeah, these render perfectly fine. These are pretty quick renders because there's no translucency. But we can still go down here to our lighting, and we can say, you know, crank up all of that stuff. And if we wanted to, we can also go to our materials here, and we can do, what would we want to do? Let's do, what's fun? We can do liquids. So we can do coffee, we can do beer. So if we want to, we can go to our scene here. So we have our plastic flower. If we want to just assign beer to all of this, you can just grab that. Now you're going to want to change a little bit of this. If we go down here to the transparency distance, crank that up to like 3 or maybe 1. Depending on the scale you bring it in, you're going to have to dial in these settings a little bit. But that'll give you that kind of transparent render, and then you're going to get caustics in here. You can also, if we want to, we can go to edit, add geometry, plane, and then we can move this plane up, and this version of KeyShot 7.1, it automatically goes in here and goes into move and scale mode, which I appreciate. Let's turn on scale, and we'll go ahead and scale this up. And you know what I should have done? I should have saved that plastic off as you can also over here, you can do model sets and you can save material sets in there, which is what I should have done, but that's okay. So now we can go in here to like an area light and we'll just double click this one. And we'll go ahead and change this to watts, and we'll go ahead and just light this from this side. So we go back to our environment, and we can drop that brightness down. If we drop it down to 0, this will be only lit by this area light here, as you can see. But we can also dial in that brightness a little bit and start bringing in some more of those environments and reflections as well. But let's take this down just a bit. There we go. There you go. So then you can see, it's giving us a very, liquid render in here. But let's go back to our plastics here, and we'll go to hard plastics. And again, we'll just do this. Oh, and they're all put together now. So what I'm going to do, and you can unlink all of these materials. So you can just click these and unlink them, or you can go through here manually and select this one and say, okay, I want that to be red, and then this one here, I want to be green, so I can just drag that right on that one here. And then we can go down to our material set here. We go hard shiny. There's our stem, so we can drag that there. And then for these eyeballs here, we want that to be black. And then for our face here, we want that to be white. And then for this interior one here, I'm going to make that a new red. And then when we double click this one, we can change this one to like a yellowy orange. There we go. So now we're getting that plastic render. And again, like I said, if we drop that brightness down all the way, we're just going to be rendering just from that one light source, or we can dial in some of that environment to start getting some of those reflections back in, or you can use them both, or you can use just this light. If you do want to take this, you can say not visible to camera, so it'll go ahead and light your object, but also turn off visibility to camera. And this one's probably a little bit much for this render, so I'm just going to change this to like a product or an interior render, and that'll be fine. So now we have our plane here. We can double click this and we can drop that power way down. There we go. So, and you can also create your own HDR in here in your environments. You can go through here and do that. If we go back to our knit here, let's go ahead and say our plastic flower is good. Let's turn our knit flower back on. Let's change some materials around on this one. So I'm going to, these all have their own materials here. So we'll start with this one here. And the material type, we'll make this into, is it going to, I guess it doesn't matter if it keeps our poly paint. Yeah, you know what, it really doesn't. So just for this one too, I'm going to go ahead and assign a plastic. And because we already have this built in, we'll see if we can do a knit on the plasticky one too. So we got a red one here, and then we'll drag another red one over here, and we'll double click this one, and we'll make this one yellowy. And then we'll do a white, and then we'll do a black, and then we'll do a green, and then we'll go to our let's see, which one is this one? Move this up, please. Knit green, there we go. And then we'll go ahead and drag that on here. So now both of these. Now, of course, all of these are a little bit too specular, so you can go through here and you can drop the specular down to a dark gray, and that way it'll render out a little bit more matte. There's also, you could do, there is cloth in here, but this cloth has weaves built in, so that's why I chose to do a plastic on this one. So again, we can just drop these speculars down. And also the roughness is very far down, so you can crank that roughness up and that'll go ahead. So you know what, let's keep that specular back up at white. And we can just drop our roughness or increase our roughness. And then for our scene, I'm going to go ahead and turn off our plane here that's getting the lighting. And then our environment, our lighting is on interior, our environment's here. Let's go ahead and turn back on our lighting environment so we can see what's going on. And let's go to an interior. We're going to do sun and sky. That's kind of a fun one. So we'll do Los Angeles at sunrise. And then if you go down here to our HDRI editor, you can change the time. So you can kind of go and let that res in here. Sun size you can increase or decrease. Ground color. All sorts of cool stuff you can do. Settings, and then now, so there's a full bright, and we can also bring the sun down just a tiny bit here. All right, so there's our sun and sky. You're getting the bounce off of the yellow onto the white and all that cool stuff here. It's all kind of built in. So that's another thing you can do. And then you can also just change that. It'll still be lit by the sun and sky, but you can change this to, you know, just a background color here. Oh yeah, material. Oh, and also I keep forgetting. You can go back to in my YouTube channel here. There's like a ZBrush Keyshot Bridge Quick Start. It's 17 videos. We go through a bunch of Keyshot stuff. And this is not the first time we've gone into Keyshot, obviously. If you go back through the channel, there's a ton of Keyshots work we've done. But you can check that out. And I'll give you some more Keyshot stuff in there. Speaking of the material graph, if you wanted to, we could take like this red one here, and we can go into material graph. So this is our plastic red we're dealing with here. So if we want to, we can go in here and do a oh, you can also do toon shader. We'll check that out. But for now, what am I looking for here? Textures. You know, color gradient is always a fun one. So we can pass this color gradient into our diffuse. And now it's going from this color to this color, so black to white from this angle. You can go through here and you can change the angle of that color gradient. And you can also have it, you know, multiply over the diffuse and all this stuff. So a lot of really cool stuff. You can do bumps and opacities and things like that. So speaking of bumps and opacities, if we want to, let's go back to our plastic flower here. And on this one, let's see, let's double click this red one here, and I'm going to go to our material graph. And for our bump on that, let's see if we can't go to textures, weave, and can we pass that into our bump? And then we can change our, we've got this on sync, height, width, angle. So we can see it coming through a bit. Now it's going to be plasticky, obviously. Crank that up just a bit here. Seems very small. Let's say, and these are linked as well, so let's change this to like 1. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing. So we'll crank that down just a bit. And then we'll go over here to bump height, and we'll say like 5. There we go. So now you can see we're putting this weave around here. So now this is just in the material in Keyshot. So you have a little bit more control as it, you know, not having it baked in. If it's baked in, and what I mean by baked in is when we're in ZBrush and we, you know, apply it to our geometry, we can't go, I mean, we can go back if it's on a layer or something, we got to go back into ZBrush and do that, whereas if it's in the texture, and same thing if you were doing this in Painter, you can just tile this and do the height on the fly. Speaking of, I think just recently, yeah, we got the Sci-Fi Pistol series here. So just recently we went through this whole thing where, you know, it was the making of the Sci-Fi Pistol. Kind of a video series. There was an NCG magazine that it was in where I went through the steps, and then basically we go through from ZBrush to a little bit of Maya straight into Painter, and then just use Painter to go ahead and texture this thing up and stamp details on it and stuff like that. So that's another fun playlist if you want to check that out. And that should be the newer, oh, I do have a new video in here, that's why I bumped it up, but it should be one of the newer ones in there. Okay, so we got that weave here. And we can change the color, but I don't think I want to, and then you could pass that in the specular if I want. So anyway, that's how you could use You know, I mean, you don't even have to go. And if you want to do more complex stuff, you can definitely go into the material graph. But for this particular one, like if we take this yellow one here, all you got to do is go to the textures tab, and in the bump, you can load in a weave. Let's see, is there anything else in here we want to try? I guess weave is okay. And then now you got that weave here, and then you can just go to height and width. We'll take that back up to 1, and then we'll scale that back down. And then we'll go back down here to the bump height, and we'll say 5. There we go. So now we've got weave on both of those. So you don't have to go on the material graph, but you certainly can. We'll drop this diffuse down just a bit again. Like so. You know what I wonder? If I go back to this one here, we go to the material graph, can I duplicate and keep input? Copy selection. And then if we go here, paste. Yeah, so you can just paste this in here. And then whoops. That'll work. Neat. All right, so we got a weave on there. What else can you do? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff you can do in KeyShot. Any video on character work in KeyShot, lighting, materials, etc. It's not any different than this, unless you're talking about skin, in which case I don't know that I'd render skin in KeyShot. I'm trying to remember if I did do any character stuff specifically. I mean, I'm sure I did, but for like game res stuff and going through ZBrush, it's kind of not optimal for me. Your mileage may vary. I mean, we did in the Batman cowl, we did take this one into KeyShot, and this was on this channel, I believe. So when we get into the render, we did a little bit of stylized rendering in here, and we also took that into KeyShot as well, and that had some skin on it. But I mean, this is what you've seen is kind of what you do in KeyShot. It's really simple, which is why I like it. It's fast and simple, and I don't have to do a whole lot of setup work. And the bridge from ZBrush to KeyShot is also good. If we want to, though, let's go just really quickly. We'll go to the materials here, tune, outline, black. I guess we could do that, and we'll go to our scene here. Hidden objects, models. I need to play around with KeyShot a little bit more. It's actually been a while, but for now I'm just going to take this tune outline and we'll just throw it right on this plastic flower. You know what? Let's throw it on the knit flower here. There we go. So now you can do a tune render on this one. Let's do tune outline black here. So when I go through here, we can do our contour width, so we can grab more of the contours or less of the contours. You can also change the contour angle to get more or less of an effect here. And we go back to our scene here. This one will probably be a little bit easier on the eyes here. There we go. And then we can go to our, again, our contour width, and then our contour angle. And then our shadow strength, you can bump that up, and now we're getting kind of like a ink render here. You can also dial in transparency between these objects too. This probably works a little bit better if you have a really complex object. And in fact, we did. Now that I say that, I want to say, you know, I probably just load this in. Yeah, here we go. This live stream full episode's in here. We did go over this. We went over the tune shader and added transparency to the handgun here, so you can see, you know, you can do kind of cool exploded views of complex models, which is kind of neat. But you can also do it with little fun models too. For some reason, when I use area lights with my render settings, translucent skin material is mostly black and just showing some sort of scattering. I had to change all the lights to an emissive or IES to make that work. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure of the reasoning behind it. Again, I don't do a ton of skin in here, but it maybe, depending, I mean, subsurface scattering and stuff works and this is a physically accurate renderer, so scale is very important in this engine or in this renderer. So depending on the scale of your object, having a physically accurate IES profile mixed with your scale could have a huge amount of impact on your SSS. You could probably dial in those settings. So if we go over to skin, the human skin settings here, you might be able to play around with these settings to make it work with however you're working, but hard to say. Let me go back to our environment here. There you go, skin flower. You think ZBrush will ever get a PBR rendering? I don't know. I would never put anything past ZBrush. They're some crafty folk. How would you combine your toon with your previous plasticky look? Oh boy. I'd probably do render passes and control that. Unless you wanted to do like a turnaround, you could possibly, let's see. I mean, there's might be some toon settings in here that you can change, like the color, you know, so you can go through here and do like a red toon shader, and you don't have to do the transparency. That's just something we dialed in, but we can put that back to 0. So you can do this, but you're not going to pick up any specular necessarily. Pause that. Transparency, but no light source shadows. But yeah, if you wanted to mix these, what you could try doing, we can go to this here. We can take the plastic flower and we can duplicate that. And on this plastic flower, we could say you are plastic, hard, shiny, red. And then we probably need to maybe scale this down a little bit. Let me see, scale 0.9. No, way too much. And then under this material, the toon material, we can drop in some transparency here. It's just going to do a full transparency with no regard to what's underneath. I'm not sure about that one. I'd have to look that one up. Cool. Yep. So, all right. So this is all keyshot stuff. So we talked about keyshot rendering. We talked about ZBrush rendering. I got about 30 minutes and really nothing on my agenda. Let me see if I have anything in streaming topics. I have enough time to. Got some Marvelous Designer stuff, but that's not really this channel specific. Stylized texturing we could do in Painter, but again, not this channel specific. Lighting in ZBrush we went over. Fusion to ZBrush we didn't really go over, but we can do that if y'all want, maybe. Yeah, nothing really specific. Do you usually do render passes with keyshot, or do you prefer to do it all in one render? I always try to render in passes if I can, just so I can have ultimate control over the final product. Let's see, did I turn off? Oh, you know what? We're just sending that over to keyshot. So if you go over here to preferences, I'm sorry, render. I'm going to turn off keyshot here so we can do a BPR render in here again. And then in keyshot. Ooh, that's really cool. I like that. I just sent it back over. So we now have like a knit mixed with the toon shader. Interesting. Anyway. Do you have a vid on keyshot passes on your channel? Oh, I think so. You're gonna need. I think you're gonna need the pro version of the keyshot. Keyshot to do your render passes here. You know what? On this one, on these ones in particular, I don't think I do. But it's fairly simple. You just tell it render passes, and it'll render to PSD. And then it'll actually pack all of your render passes into a PSD. You're going to have some EXR files that you're going to have to convert, but you know, that's not terribly difficult either. when is it necessary to do retopology? If you're doing game res stuff, I like to do retopology just to control the details of my mesh once I have something I'm happy with. So for example, let's go back to document. I'm going to turn on W size and hit new. I got to be a document this size here, so let's see if I can find an example for you. Prehistoric creatures. Guess we did an old man. Chops McGee, will pull him in. So for example, oh good. Let's go ahead. It looks like I passed too much stuff through ZBrush. No problem. Load it back up. Actually, I'm going to have to reposition this. Keyshot does not remember my screen position. And luckily we didn't really lose anything. I can just go and load that back up. I'll show you guys in just a second here. So if we did want to pull back in what we were working on here, you can see this recovered Z tool or the recovered Z project might be in here, but that's okay. We don't need it. I'm just going to load in this guy here. So we go back here to old man. Oh, actually, you know what? I did do recently a retopology. I forgot. So we can also load in this one here we are working on. Prehistoric creatures, giant anteater, fiber mesh. So if I load this one in, you can see here's our giant anteater here. We can turn perspective. I won't turn on AO or anything, but we will drop that down to like a skin shader. We can render this out. So basically, I sculpted out this giant anteater and then applied fiber mesh, obviously. And in fact, if you go back, oh, you know what? This is on my channel. So on my channel, I did this one. And it's basically just a pretty simple anteater sculpt with fiber mesh added. Let's wait for this to render in. And, oh, I guess I can get rid of that too. And there we go. So there's our fiber mesh here. And if I wanted to, I go like BG, brush groom, hair toss, and we can alt tap on these ones, and you can go through here and you can comb his hair if you want to. Go comb his tail here. So we talked a lot about this and fiber mesh and how to get that to work in passes and also inherit your poly paint, because the guy here, the original guy, going to solo mode here. So he's just a very simple model with a poly paint. If I turn his poly paint off and also apparently his texture off. Yeah, so he is UV'd. And this is just a ZBrush UV texture thing. We turn his poly paint off. Now you kind of see this is just his basic sculpt. And then this is the poly paint applied to him. And then on top of all of that is the hair inheriting, the fiber mesh inheriting that poly paint there. So anyway, so that's all we did. But for this one, what I did was once I was done sculpting this, I went ahead and Z-remeshed him and then rebuilt his geometry just to get a little bit nicer geometry around the eyes here. So basically where I would go to retopologize is once you're pretty much done, and the reason I brought this guy in here is if we take this guy's face, and I think this is a previous stream on this channel. I could be wrong. Maybe it's my channel. I forget. I don't even know where I am most days. I'm going to go into solo mode here, and so this guy's just a Dynamesh, right? So if I wanted to go ahead and retopologize this guy, as long as I'm not going to be doing anything crazy, like you know, pulling anything out that's nuts, like doing major changes like this. And of course you can do crazier things. In fact, if I was going to do that, I'd probably go to my chisel creature brush, and we can go through here and we can be like, yeah, just do some really cool vector displacement alphas and stuff like that, which we've gone over before. Give him a little Darth Maul. There we go. Back through here. So if I'm not doing that stuff anymore and I've got pretty much my forms figured out, I would at this point go through and retopologize and then project that detail back. But of course I'd probably want to put a mouth bag in here first. So we can do that really quick if y'all want. Let's say, okay, this is my guy's mouth here. Let's go ahead and crank our lazy radius up, tap L. So here's our little mouth. And you know what, we're probably underneath this mouth here. We can go ahead and bulge this out just a little bit. So this stuff is so fun. This is the fun stuff to do in ZBrush. Let's see, preferences, edit, turn off line cursor to surface. And you can go through here and you can inflate. We kind of did some crazy stuff to his nose here, so I'm going to kind of ease those transitions out a little bit. And then also in here, let's go ahead and inflate this up. That's going to cause some problems. All right, so this is basically here. We got the nostrils pushed in, and if I wanted to put a mouth bag in here, I can go through here and we can insert. I guess just a sphere will be fine. We'll put that in his mouth, and we'll go ahead and split mask points. And for this one here, let's go ahead and it just inherited the Dynamesh properties that were in our previous mesh here, and that's fine. But for this mouth bag, we'll go ahead and go into transparency mode, and we can go ahead and set this up. So let's hold down Alt, tap X to go off, and then Alt and reset this, and now we can scale this out and back a little bit. And you can also go through here and move this stuff like so. So this way we can put like teeth and tongues and stuff in here. And then in order to get this to line up correctly, I'm going to mask this area here, Control tap to invert that mask, and then just pull this out this way. And this is what's going to clip through his mouth here, and then we can just match this up to our lips. We can also Control Shift to Dynamesh this again, and then that'll re-Dynamesh, and now we can have a little bit, again, a little bit more control. You can even go in here and use your pinch brush and pinch this down. Because basically all we're looking for is just a way to cut through the mouth and separate these lips out like so. If you want to preview what this is going to look like, turn on your live Boolean and then just make this subtractive, and now you can see what we're doing. And even on the fly, you can go through here and move this thing around or pinch it together here like so. So there. Now we've got an interior mouth section in here. Once we have this, what we can do is, I mean, we could just Dynamesh this together. We can merge this down and Dynamesh it, but let's go ahead and just have these two on, and we'll go down here to Boolean, make Boolean mesh, and now we've got a union mesh here, which is just our mouth bag Dynamesh with this one. So now we don't even need this one anymore, and we don't even need this one anymore, and now we can just go to append or insert our new head here, and now he has all of those pieces here. Now because I have that interior polygroup and exterior polygroup, when I go to ZBrush this thing, I can tell it keep polygroups. It'll keep a nice line around those two. So you can also do it for the eyes as well. You can also put in control curves. So BC, brush curve, nope, brush. What are we talking about? BZ remesher guides. And you can go through here and you can put in little guides to have it follow. Also turn on X symmetry here. But what I prefer to do is just go through here, and let's turn off our lines. This is a fairly low res head, so I would actually probably detail this up just a little bit more just to make sure all my forms were in there, and then I would go through here and mask this stuff out. There's also a really good tutorial I'll show you guys in a second. I didn't do it, but you can follow along. I haven't actually followed it yet. I need to, but you can go ahead and put a group in here. And you can also go through here, if we hold down Control and go to Auto Masking, do Mask by Polygroups up to 100. And if you want to use these polygroups now to control, like, okay, where the mouth is going to go around, you can put in a polygroup here and kind of have that, have ZRemesher kind of dial this shape in. And you can hit Control W, and then you can go like into the nostrils and mask those out as a separate polygroup here. And then down the nose, or around the eyeballs here, you can make this all one polygroup. And this is just, it's basically building in, instead of going through here and like framing your mesh with guides or anything, you can just have these polygroups dictate where your edge flow goes. We'll hit Control W. And then what I'm talking about is if you go to ZBrushforIllustrators.com. Tony Leonard has a channel on here as well. He's really good. He does a lot of this type of drawing. So you can click through here and go to the YouTube channel. So basically blocking out your meshes in ZBrush, doing a stylized render like I showed you here with the Pablo Munoz Gomez ZBrush guides, and then also doing the halftone stuff in Photoshop is kind of cool. You could probably do that in the shader as well. Might be a little bit tricky. But if you scroll down here, you're going to see Steve James also has a really good one. And basically what we're doing is, here's our Dynamesh, and then we're just going through here and grouping. So you can group out this stuff, and then when you ZRemesh it, it'll go ahead and ZRemesh for you a little bit more controlled. So again, we got our lips in here. Let's go ahead and we can just follow this along. So we can go here and grab the nose through here. And I'm just going to pass this all the way around here. I'm not doing my groups exactly like he did, but I think you guys will get the idea. And we can go through here, and we can put another big kind of raccoon mask through here, like a robin mask. Oops. And then the rest of it can be grouped, and then our ears, I suppose. That can just all be one poly group here. And ZRemesh, depending on your settings, will actually do ears pretty admirably. Same thing with fingers, it does a pretty good job. There we go. So we'll dial that in, and we'll see how that goes. This one here we might need to clean up. In fact, you can also do you can do polish by features on this one. I wouldn't necessarily do that with this face, but if you wanted to do like a hard surface kind of dude, you can just go by polish by features, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. And that's just like a panel loops thing. In fact, you know what? Let's do that. Let's duplicate this guy off, and we're going to do a quick, just for fun, we'll do, this is under your deformation menu. If you want this custom menu, go to, you can go to my Gumroad or my ZBrush page, and you can scroll all the way down to the bottom. And if you want to just download this stuff, you can. It's all free. Not all of it, but most of it is. And then you can go down here to the Intro to ZBrush files. And if you go in here, there's installation instructions for your custom menus and stuff. But what I would also do is on my YouTube channel, if you go to Intro to ZBrush Part 2 on the playlist, that'll walk you through how to set up your own custom brushes, your own custom interface here. What am I looking for? Yeah, custom hotkeys. You can do hotkeys, custom interface, custom menus, and you can set up your own. It's really simple to do in ZBrush. So go through and do that if you'd like, or if you want mine, go to Gumroad, go to ZBrush, and just download it and install it. I mean, mine's nothing special, so just so you're aware, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick auto groups here. One thing you can do with all these, you can also do under poly groups, there's a merge stray groups and merge similar groups, which will kind of clean up some interesting strays you might have in here. But also I'm going to go ahead and do a quick auto groups, and then do a quick mirror and weld. I'm just going to weld these two poly groups together here. A little bit of cleanup here, and also this is probably going to be problematic in here. If you want to, one thing you can do, if we take both of these poly groups here, we can merge these together, and if I want to kind of back these ones off, one thing you can do, since this is kind of low res as it is, you can hold down Alt and start painting over this orange one, and then tap Shift, and now you can paint with this poly group. That's basic ZModeler stuff in here you can do. So you can go through here and manually just go through here and paint your poly groups if you'd like to clean them up just a bit. Yeah, that'll work. Anyways, so we got this one. I'm going to actually, since we cleaned this one up, I'm going to delete this one. So this one here, we were saying we're going to have a little bit of fun with it. So I'm going to go over here to my deformation menu, and we're going to do polish by features. If you do closed circle, that'll maintain your forms. So see how are his volumes, see how his face kind of stays that way. If you do open circle, that will really polish him and not really respect his volumes all that much. But the cool thing about this is you can ZRemesh this if you want to. But at this point, we could also go in here to geometry, edge loops, and let's go ahead and turn off our lines here. And we could do panel loops, so you can pop those out, and you can just like crank up the thickness, and you can go ahead. You know what? Let's do our elevation at -100. So when you do our panel loops, that'll stay the same, and then we do Control Shift A. And you can see this guy is all separated out in individual pieces. You could split them apart. You can also do, let's see how well this will work. So we've got this one here. If you go to the Z plugin area, you're going to see panel loop presets. If you don't have that installed, go to ZBrush plugins, Pixologic Download Center. Scroll all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see employee created plugins, and you're going to see panel loop presets. Just download that and then throw it into your ZBrush 4R8, Z Startup, Zplug 64. Now you're going to have a folder in there called Zplug panel loop presets, and then you're going to have a Z script called panel loop presets. You just copy it in here, restart ZBrush, and then it'll show up over here. And now you'll have a bunch of presets you can pull from. So if you want to, do this preset, you can say yes. And it's like, okay, this preset's pretty cool. Not quite what I wanted, so hit Control Z, and now you can go through here and dial in and just hit panel loops, and then I'll go ahead and dial that in for you. So on this one, if we want to do another quick mirror and weld, and then we'll do a, let's duplicate this one off again, and we'll do a split the similar parts. And then if we go out of solo mode here, you can do maybe under transform, it's doing expose X, Y, and Z, and then you can kind of explode this guy out, or we can just do it in the X maybe. Yeah, so you can explode this guy out into all his different pieces here. So now you kind of have like a robotic kind of shell that you can use, and you can go through here and alt tap this one. You can like turn this one off, and turn this one off, and turn maybe this one off, maybe turn his nostrils off. There you go. Kind of an interesting little thing here. But to go back to this guy, and we'll go back. There we go. So we got this guy. So if you want to Z-remesh this one, let's go ahead and we can, well, let me catch up here. How much more time we got? I got about 15 minutes. Let's go back through here. Yeah, you can do the, yeah, that's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate it off. Let me see, delete. There we go. If you need intense details like skin pores, you want to keep your mesh clean, isn't stylized, check out Shane Olson. Yeah, and when we did this one, it was basically that same where you do stylized modeling with primitives and Dynamesh. It's pretty simple. It's pretty fun to do as well. Yes, and then interesting question. What do you think the chance of getting in the AAA company like CG Project Red Witcher without having worked in the industry with a very high skill set in ZBrush? Depends on what they want and what their what your portfolio looks like, and if they're looking for somebody who is just really good at ZBrush and nothing else, you might get hired. I would say at my company, you'd have to be really good at ZBrush only in order to get hired, because ZBrush is only one part of the pipeline. We're automating a lot of it as well through Houdini and stuff like that and other tools, but you need to know something other than just ZBrush, at least in my opinion. But again, that's just one company, my opinion, and that's just my opinion. That's not even really my company's opinion. They might differ, but depending on what they're looking for, if they just need a high-res artist, sure. What do you press to create an instant group from masking? Control W. Cool. Yeah. Cool. All right, so let's see how this works out. We're going to go through here. And okay, let's Z-remesh this thing. So now if I did have details on him, I don't have a ton of details obviously, but let's say this was a very detailed mesh. First we would duplicate this guy off and then go into our Z-remesh settings here. And we're going to say we want to keep our groups. If you have smooth groups turned on, it will smooth the line around your groups, which we probably do want, maybe not 1, let's say like 0.5. Our target polygon count, I'm not really sure what it's going to be, but 5K sounds fine. We can always do half later or dial that in a little bit later. And adaptive size, I'll just keep it 50. Yeah, so we'll hit Z-remesher. And if you wanted to dial in, and this is stuff we've gone over before, so if you wanted like to have less polygons on the back of the head and more polygons on the face, you could say use poly paint and paint in your color density as well as using your groups, so you can dial that in. And so here's our ZBrush, our loops here. Let's undo that. Let's go ahead and say, let's smooth our groups a little bit more. And we also have X turned on, which is going to take your, see how activate symmetry is on. I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen. Activate symmetry is on in the X. Oh, you know what? I guess I can also move my head back so I'm not in your way. There you go. And if you don't like that midline algorithm, what you can do is you can hold down Alt and hit ZBrush, and that'll give you a different algorithm for your midline. We can also raise the poly count, since I'm not super concerned about the poly count on this guy. Give it a second. There we go. So now that gives us a different algorithm down the midline. But feel free to dial in these settings however you want. But once you get in this object, what you can also do is, since we have our polygroups here, and it is symmetrical, you can go ahead and UV this thing, but you don't have to do it now, you can do it later. So we have this one here, so we have both of these, so all I need to do is go into my project menu, and we can say project all, and then we can subdivide this mesh, project all, subdivide this mesh, project all, subdivide this mesh, project all, and then if I go out of polyframe mode and we go into solo mode, you're going to see here is my new topology. Here's my old topology. They look about the same. Delete that old one, and now we've got new topology with subdivisions, with new, new topology, new subdivisions. And if you wanted to, you could also go through here and do a Z plugin, UV master, symmetry, polygroups, unwrap, and then hit flatten. Oh, you know what? We got to work on a clone. Duh. Don't unwrap this. Work on a clone. And that's what that's basically going to do is delete your higher. So we're just working on the lowest resolution one here, and then we can do symmetry, polygroups, unwrap, flatten, and now we've got our object all flattened out. So we do have UVs. We can unflatten this. We can copy the UVs, and we can go in here and we can paste those UVs, and then we can go back up to solution level, whatever. And there we go. And let's go ahead and turn off poly paint there. So we've got our mesh here, and now the cool thing is we can go back down to like lower subdivisions, and we can hold down shift, and we can just start sculpting. Let's go to smooth stronger here. So now we can go through here, and you could even just do a polish by features, just to kind of smooth them out a little bit. But now you have new topology. You know, you can use it as a game res or whatever you wanted to, but you can also go through here, and now you can mask. Oh, you know what? We still have go into your brush and turn. Come on. Go to mask by polygroups down to 0. There we go. But now you can go through here. You can hold down Control, and you can drag, and you'll be able to mask out along your topology here. You can also just hold down Control, and since its mouth is slightly open, you can just go through here and mask this out. So now you can go through here, you can pull this down, you can inflate it, and you can move it down a little bit. You can overlap this top lip here. Let's go through and inflate this just a bit, and then invert that, and we'll inflate these lips just a bit. And again, like I said, you can put teeth in there. You can go through here and just kind of start sculpting this around, and we can modify this here. Let's go up one more subdivision level, and I'm going to do a smooth on this one. Deformation, and we'll just pull a and now at this point it's just a matter of going through here and just increasing the fidelity of your mesh and sculpting and inflating and dialing it in. And you can also hold down Control Shift and isolate just individual parts here, so you can just focus on these little individual parts, since you do have your polygroups in here, which is nice. So I don't know, we'll keep this guy around, and we'll keep playing with him as we move forward in other channels here. And you're going to also want to make sure you have Dynamesh turned off so you don't accidentally control drag, which I do all the time. There we go. And now you can also do layers and kind of use those as blend shapes if you want. Go in here with your Damien standard brush. We can start, again, it's just a matter of cleaning up this face just a little bit with our new topology. Cut this in and then maybe inflate this up a little bit. The other cool thing about not having to work with Dynamesh is you can pull and you overlap geometry here, like in the back of the nose, and get really nice sharp transitions, or on the lips, and not have to worry about it sticking together or anything like that. So that's another reason why you know, retopologizing past a certain point is also super helpful. Super fun. Let's see, I missed anything here? I'm probably going to call it a day. I think I'm pretty much done. Cool, cool. All right. Cool. Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks everybody for showing up. And again, if you want to see the video on demands here, you can always go to this playlist on Pixelogic's channel. That's my channel here. Of course, I've got other really good people on there. If you go to Pixelogic's channel and go to their playlists here, you can see all the people who stream on their channel, and I'm probably buried in here because I haven't done it in a while. But there's a lot of really cool stuff you can check out in here. So go there, and also on my YouTube channel that I stream on Thursdays, and I also just do a bunch of other content. So there's other stuff in here. If you go to my live stream full episodes, there is a whole bunch of just stuff in there. So anyway, see y'all later. Thanks for showing up. And I'll catch y'all this Thursday on my channel.